Welcome back to another powerful episode of the Men's Collective podcast. Right now, masculinity is under fire.
I know for a fact if a girl asked me what my bank account was, like the first time we went on a date, I would be like, I'm definitely not into you. If that's all I care about. Like, if that's all you care about.
How much is in your bank before I decide if you're good looking or not?
Yeah, correct.
I had to determine what was more valuable, dying with a pocket full of pearls or the potential of having to starve to death, so I grabbed 3 oranges. So the value right there and then, you're pushing past worth thousands of dollars of jewels to grab a 30-cent orange. Why? Because the value right there and then is immensely different. But there are apps out there that require what society has created, a certain level of value or a certain level of worth for men to even get on the app. So the app itself is going, you need to be, in our eyes, valuable or worth a certain amount of entirety or as a whole before you can even jump on this. It's lied to us. Society has made it seem like it's a far bigger contribution on who you are, but it's by no means, I believe, what makes up a man his own self-worth and building his own identity through that. So I think that's major. Welcome to the Men's Collective podcast. In this space, we keep the conversations real, inspiring, and challenging you to become the man you are destined to be. Your family needs you to be better. Your friends need you to be better. We need you to be better. We are your hosts, the AverageJoes. Gentlemen, welcome back to another powerful episode of the Men's Collective podcast. This is where we dive into the real conversations that most men aren't having, but need to be. Because let's be honest, right now, masculinity is under fire. We are the Average Joes. Wayne Taylor is the name, and as always, I'm joined by 3 of my very good mates, ready to deep dive into the good stuff. Fellas, welcome once again. Chrisso, Mikie, Jamie.
Hey, mate.
Boys. Good to be here, lads.
Last week's one was an absolute ripper, wasn't it?
It was.
Pretty heavy.
Enjoyed it.
Ready for round 2?
Mate, let's do
Also.
it.
The stuff. Well, fellas, welcome. Look, the war on masculinity is real. Look, there was a time when being a good man meant something clear-cut. Protector, provider, leader. Today, those same roles are being questioned, redefined, and in many cases, outright rejected. We're told traditional masculinity is toxic or expected to be strong but sensitive, assertive but accommodating, confident but not too confident. Look, if you ever felt like you can't win, like the rules of manhood are constantly shifting, well, you are definitely not alone. And the numbers don't lie. A recent article in the Times show that young men are falling behind in education and in earnings, while young women are now outpacing them in both. Male suicide rates remain significantly higher than female. And yet, look, the approach to somehow help these situations is to throw taxpayers' money into ridiculous, let's call it safe spaces for men with slogans suggesting that all men need to do is just talk. The dating game has changed dramatically. Studies show that women are becoming pickier. And these apps reinforce that idea that the only top earning and most successful men are the ones that are truly valued. If you don't believe me that we are in a war on masculinity, look, ask yourself this. When was the last time a man was celebrated simply for being a great father, a strong leader, even just a hard-working provider? The goalposts have moved, and that's exactly why we are here, to challenge, dissect, and rebuild what it really means to be a man in today. Look, last week we kicked off this series, The War on Masculinity, with an episode 1 that we called Thermostats and Thermometers, a discussion about whether men are setting the temperature in their own lives or just reacting to the heat. Are we leaders or are we followers? Are we driving our own destiny or just getting dragged along? If you missed that one, go back, check it out. It lays the foundation for everything we're talking about today. Look, in today's topic, episode 2, The War on Masculinity, I have called this one A Man's Worth. So, what actually determines a man's worth? Society has long told us that men are providers, but is that the only thing that defines us? Is a man only as good as his paycheck? Do women and society value men based on their ability to earn? Bringing to light the age-old question, why does the richest men seem to get the prettiest girls? Let's be real. If a broke-looking guy walks into a bar, he's invisible. If a billionaire walks in, suddenly he's the most attractive man in the room. So, is masculinity only valuable when it comes attached to money, or is there something deeper? Huge shout out to our sponsors for supporting these crucial conversations. You guys are absolute legends and we appreciate it. Look, before we dive in, do us a favor, smash that like button, hit the subscribe and share this with a mate or two. The more men we reach, the stronger this movement becomes. Let's get the conversation out there. Righto, a man's worth. Imagine 2 things, standing side by side, towering oak tree and a nice good looking ATM machine. The ATM dispenses money on demand. If it stops giving out cash, most people walk away without even a second thought. It only holds value as long as it provides money. The oak tree, on the other hand, doesn't hand out cash, but it provides shade, oxygen, and strength. It offers a place to rest, to climb, and to even build around. Even when it stops growing, its roots run very, very deep, keeping the ground stable for future generations. A man's worth isn't determined by how much he dispenses, but in his strength, his wisdom, and the impact he brings to the lives of those around him. Money can come and go, but true value, just like the old oak tree, runs much deeper. Men are often judged the same way. Society values the polished, high-earning man, the one with the status. But what about the man who's struggled? The man who've built their families and stood by their values and fought their own battles? Is their worth invisible? Well, today I want to get into it. Fellas, man's worth. Are you ready? Well, as always, I'm going to kick off with a simple yes or no question. I'm going to come back to you for your reasons why. But I'm sure you can all agree we are definitely in a war on masculinity. So I want to ask this straight out question. The richer the man, the better the man. Yes or no? Jamie?
No.
Chrisso, the richer the man, the better the man.
No, I don't think so.
Mikey?
Nope.
Definitely the same with me. Jamie, tell us why.
Well, I guess I don't judge people by how much they have at that particular time, because I've seen really wealthy people become poor, and I've seen really poor people become wealthy. So I think something I'd rather, I guess, judge people on is their values. Or, I think one thing that isn't actually looked at enough is a man's word these days. Like, does a man actually stick to his word or not? So, yeah.
Chrisso, richer the man, better the man. You said no. Why is that the case?
Oh, look, I don't think. Absolutely. Society definitely makes us believe, the more money and the more wealth you have, the more valuable you are. But yeah, I don't particularly look at people with money as any different, and I don't think anyone else should. I guess when I look at people that I haven't met, that I don't know about, if they're possessing wealth, then isn't that them, I guess, big noting themselves and putting themselves on a pedestal, saying, hey, look, I'm more valuable because I've got money? Or, there's wealthy people out there, you look at people like Clive Palmer or whatever. He's a billionaire, but he rocks around in a shitty pair of jeans and a shirt. There's people out there that are super wealthy and they'll let you know about it. But there's also people out there that are humble, wealthy people that hold themselves of the same regard as you and I.
Very true. Mikey, you said no as well, bud. Why is that?
Well, money comes and goes, doesn't it? Like we've seen guys. If you had money, you could win the lottery tomorrow and be a billionaire or a millionaire, and wouldn't mean anything, would it? You haven't achieved anything. You haven't changed anything. Money's a tool, and I think what you do with that is what counts. So the value of a man, I would put it more in his values himself, how he lives his life, and how he sticks to his values. How you see him when the pressure's on. Does he stick to what he believes? Does he go with the wind, go with the flow, or does he hold into what's true to him?
Definitely. I think we can all agree that when you look at a man's, let's call it his dollar figure, his dollar value, the wealthier a man gets, I think we can all agree that the wealthier a man gets, it definitely amplifies his level of influence. Wealthier men seem to be able to pull more strings because money creates a sense of power, right? So I think we can all agree that the more a man is financially worth, the more influence he has. But it definitely doesn't define his character. I think money, because you actually can see the character in men change sometimes the wealthier they get. And then, you can see it shift the broker they get. You can see their character. So I think we can all agree that it does definitely give you a sense of status of increased influence. But if that being the case then, so yes, we all can agree on that, the fact that the richer the man, the better the man isn't the case. But society seems to give us that impression though. So if that's the impression that we're getting, Where has that come from? Who started it? Is
Well-
it a generational thing? Is it?
Well, I'm going to blame the men here because it was always that women would like someone that is wealthier because they're going to be looked after better. It's just it's natural. It's normal. You know what I mean? They want to protect the family. They want their family to be secure, and they want them to be able to have looked after and have that safety sort of thing there. Yeah. So that's just one thing out of the list of their worries that is gone. Hence why, super successful people normally have, younger, hotter wives. And even though whether you think it's right or whether it's wrong, that is the case. You see all the movie stars going around, I think Leo, doesn't date anyone over 25 sort of thing.
But are you saying that men created that, you think?
No, I think the issue is that men started to go along with society and go, oh yeah, I also believe the worth of a man can be determined by how much money they have. Yeah, that's why I went where, what I'd like to believe is that the word of a man should be the determining factor. Can you call up this guy when you need him, and is he going to come around and help you? Is he going to sacrifice for you and give you either his time or what little money he has or what he has to actually help you out? Does he have your back, either whether you're being super successful or whether you're down and out? I think that's the thing that's missing, and that's the reason why Average Joes is so important, because you can have a group of men, and it doesn't have to be Average Joes, it can be your mates, You can have a group of men that have your back no matter what. Because, you say that money changes people or can change people. It's actually an amplifier on who they really were in the first place. And sometimes I think men need to have other men who can actually tell them, mate, you're doing the wrong thing. Or actually, you know what? You're doing the right thing. It's just not working yet. It just hasn't, the wind's not behind you yet, but keep going and keep doing the right thing, because everything I see you doing right now is actually, who you are and who you should be, and you'll get those results if you keep pushing. So, because, if you've got those people behind you, it's amazing if you have a fantastic partner, and it's rare to have a fantastic partner that will get behind you straight off the bat. And when you have it, it's amazing. But when you don't have it, that's where your mates can come in behind you and have your back.
So when it comes to worth rate, let's look at I've seen some third world countries. I've been throughout Kenya, Congo, and I've seen some stuff. And culturally, if you look at Western culture here in Australia, you take a guy, because Mikie and I see it every Thursday night on the feeding at the community, feed the homeless thing that we do on a Thursday, and we see it. But you take cultural differences. You go on a Thursday night, and the guys that are destitute, homeless, broke, poor, they actually look like depressed, down and out, like they look miserable. They just do. You go into a third world country like Africa, and you see the destitute, the poor, and I've seen it firsthand. They're happy as. It's as if you can still take the same monetary value on people, but it seems to be culturally there's been a standard that's been set. Because you take the same poor person here, they look miserable. You go over there to a poor person, they're happy as. Why? It has to be cultural somehow.
They're also not sitting amongst it. Like, you go out to these villages in Africa or wherever you've been, that's all there is. Whereas the guys that are sitting in Nambour High Street are seeing a guy pull up in a Mercedes, jump out, go into the shops, seeing people with money doing stuff. So I think that there's probably a bit of difference there, but we're certainly teaching people very differently here. Over there, you're just grateful for what you've got. Over here, it's everyone else's fault.
That's an interesting thought, because I think what you're saying is right. When you go to, say, the feeding thing that we do, and you do see, the down and outers coming out of the bush to come and get fed, but the guy drives past in the Merc, right? There's an increase of comparisons available, because these guys are there in a food handout line getting fed for free, but watching the Merc go past. So there's an instant comparison there, because they're seeing a guy on the same street worth a couple of mil and they're not. Whereas in Africa, they don't see it.
I don't know if it is that the other guy's worth more. It's how they're looked at. The guy that drives past in the Merc looks at these guys like they're lesser value. He's bought into that.
So do you think the guy in the Merc looks down at the guy in the line more than the guy in the line looks up to the guy in the Merc?
But possibly. It's all about perceptions because you don't really know until you stop the guy and have the conversation. But the amount of times we've pulled up on a Thursday and there'll be a couple of guys, a small group of people just going off, shouting, causing a scene. Look at me, look at me. As soon as you go over there and we set up and we're there talking and what's going on, they all actually calm down. They're being seen. And that's men, women, young guys, young girls alike. Once they actually feel seen and heard, they completely change how they behave. And they're no longer a problem, as it were. They're not making a nuisance to anyone.
It's interesting because it makes me realise how many conversations that we've had with people at that barbecue where, you know, they join the line, they come to get fed and we start like a general conversation. Hey, mate, how's your day? How's your week kind of thing? And then people will sit down and, you know, we'll wander and sit down and have some chats. And I've had chats with people because there are the standout ones like Troy, the guy that always rocks up with no shirt, no teeth. Great guy, but you know he's destitute, right?
Yeah.
And he's quite happy to chat with her. Nice enough guy, but you can see he's struggling. But there's been times where I've had conversations with people that have joined the line, sat down to eat, and you go, hey, mate, so, you know, tell us about your day, tell us about your week. Oh, mate, I'm just coming through work. I own the business up the road. And you're like, what the hell are you doing in this line? But it's funny, hey,
We take donations.
yeah. Where's your wallet, mate? But you do instantly, like, because they're both in the same line, you both give them the same, do you call it judgment? But you both give them the same worth until you get to hear their story.
Well, look, that's probably the difference. So how we've done it is you don't know whether someone's got nothing or they've got plenty or they're lonely or they're whatever it is, they're just there. Whereas I suppose even the people serving them treat everyone the same. Whereas we've had volunteers in the past that haven't stayed around long and they look down on them like they're giving, you know, you should be grateful for what I'm giving you here. They've only turned up and just handed it over. They haven't paid for it. They just turn up and hand it over to someone and they think they deserve some sort of a thank you or you should be grateful. I find that the interesting part, hey.
It's true, mate. Look, when we've said it here many, many times on the podcast about, you know, the 3 Ps that make up a man: protect, provide, and preside, meaning lead. Protector, provider, and a leader. When you take those 3 things, those 3 main attributes of a man, and you package that up in an attractive way to a female, what do you think's the standout one if the woman was to pick one of the 3, right? Because if you were to break it down, if he was to be a protector, so let's just say he's a world-class martial arts expert, but he's dead broke and has no leadership skills in the family. You take a guy that can, you know, so him being the protector. You take a guy that has amazing leadership values, can make good decisions, fantastic, but is as weak as piss and has no money. Or you take a bloke that's an absolute billionaire, but he's also weak as piss but can't lead. So you've got a really rich bloke, a really strong bloke, or a really great leader. What one do you think the woman would pick the most?
In today's society and where we are, I think they'd take the provider. Because you don't need to be you don't need to be protected now, do you? Because
money can buy you protection.
Yeah.
Well, it's 87%. I looked at it this morning. 80, let's just call it 84 just to be case. 84% of women would rather pick the richer bloke over the other 2. Where has that come from?
Well, it is society. It's a safer society these days. I don't think that would be the same in less safe places. You know, so I think that's the case.
So basically, what we're saying is, you take a lineup of men and a lineup of women. Women go, what's the profile of each of these guys? Oh, he's got the money. Oh, we'll take him.
But I also think that because we can talk percentages, but it's generalization. Do you know what I mean? I think it depends on the women as well. Because there's so many good women out there that see a guy with potential and go, I'm going to help this guy become the best version of himself that he can become. Do you know what I mean? So it doesn't mean that you have to have that sort of thing. They might see those leadership qualities in them and see that, they do love their family more than anything else. And they go, well, okay, I can help him become the man that could be the provider for the family. So I think it's tough to deal in generalizations. I think absolutely, if you're going to pick one or the other, most will go, oh yeah, well, I'd rather money. But it doesn't mean that there's not good women out there that actually go, we're gonna build this together, and we're gonna, it's gonna be me and you versus the world type thing. So,
well, I guess girls, yeah, sure, they love the money part, but are those guys going to be the ones that are going to stick around and be there, stand by their side for the rest of their lives, marry them, yeah, sure, they got money, but that's a great attribute to have, but I think a lot of girls still would choose the guy that's going to treat her the right way, and then, like Jamie said, support them and guide them into being, a successful man, which is what women are great at doing. Getting behind the man, building the man up, and helping him to collectively get there and make money and have cash, be the provider. So yeah, I think it's not always going to be the case that the money things be all and end all. I think if she sees the attributes in a man that she can see, she can work with. Then
do you think that works well though in a first round pick or a second round pick for women? What I mean by that is, like, if you take a woman that's 45, divorced, got 2 kids to her first marriage, now she's back around again. Do you think she then looks beyond the money and goes for those things? But take it back to the first round pick. Do you think a young woman out there that's looking for a young man, surely, I mean, we're just saying, like, yes, I can appreciate that generalising it is important, but statistically it's been proven through statistics that it's, for the first round picks, that's like the number one thing. Which means if that's the number one thing, then what is attractive means that they've looked beyond things like loyalty, strength, wisdom, like all these other attributes that men can or men do have and possess and provide. But it means that they've been overlooked in order to be wealthier.
well, do you think that potentially that should be the red flag that the guys could look at? Is that if that's all they care about is the money? What's that Eagles song? The Lion Eyes, where she goes marries an old guy just because of the money and all the rest of it, and he doesn't love her. And then eventually they're going to break up anyway. And in Australia, they'll take half the money anyway. You know what I mean? So
it doesn't matter the second time round because you got the money from the first one.
So maybe that should be something that guys are looking for, is actually a woman who just doesn't care about the money, who wants to is actually looking at those other attributes. So, I know for a fact if a girl asked me what my bank account was, like the first time we went on a date, I would be like, I'm definitely not into you. If that's all I care about. Like, if that's all you care about.
How much is in your bank before I decide if you're good looking or not?
Yeah, correct. Because as I said, there's going to be times over your life where you're doing really, really well and you might not be doing as well. And that's when you're not doing as well, that's when you need your partner to have your back, So that's just like the guy having the standard of, oh yeah, she's a size 8 now, but if she ever goes to a size 12, then that's it. The relationship's over.
You guys have the same rules too.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh.
But, that's not acceptable. But it is acceptable for a woman to go, how much money do you have? So for me, do you think that should be a red flag?
100%.
Yeah.
But I think you look at, even from us being teenagers, we play into that game, and we almost tempt, like who got their first car and was super pumped to go and look for girls. Like, you think it's an attraction. The guy that can drive, got the car first out of the group, he's the alpha and everyone wants to go with him. And, the girl.
I remember actually seeing that firsthand. Actually, when I was in Cranbrook High School. I can't remember this guy's name, but he was and in no disrespect to the guy, but he was just this lanky, skinny, dorky guy that no one had any time for. But growing up with him in primary school, no one really knew the age difference. I mean, you know, you knew what each other's birthday was because, you know, you back in the day you're allowed to bring a cake to school, so you knew it was someone's birthday because the parents made a cake, right? But you didn't realise the importance of when it got to like 17, 18, because he ended up turning 18 before all of us, right? Now, this is, I know you guys can appreciate this car, but he turned 18 and he got this Tirana SLR 500 or SLR 5000, whatever it was. I remember it was, but it was this sky blue and it was pimped out like the SLRs were, right? And he went instantly like the popular kid. And it was like, this kid was a no one. Like this kid was like, you go, no, that's not, are you... 2 weeks ago, this was the kid that no one had any time for. He's just turned 18, owns the car, and he's the popular, good-looking chicks hanging off him kind of
See
guy.
what I mean? We do it. We're kind of designed that way, and that's how we first do it.
Which sucks. We're all saying it. It's crap. Society has done it. So, keeping with what we're talking about in today's topic, then it creating or it's setting the standard of a man's worth. If going down this path, we all can disagree. Society's throwing statistics at it that show, you know, it's so attractive. What builds a man's worth then? What creates a man's worth?
I think in my situation, I know having Selena believing in me from the start, and that was actually part of one of the things I said in my vows. That she believed in me in a time when I didn't, and she made me realise my own worth, because at the time I didn't realise it. So I think, having women believe in you and encouraging you to be a better man, I think that's a massive thing for guys. And understanding their own worth.
Do you think we need a woman to be valuable though? Like Selena helped you, she helped you discover your worth, but you weren't worth any less the week before you met her, if you know what I mean.
Actually, that's even a good question. Did she help you discover your worth, or did you know?
She did, yeah.
So you didn't know your worth beforehand?
No.
Okay, that opens up a whole
But that's
new
what I
thing.
was trying to get at.
So how do we...
She helped me realise my own worth.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so Mike's raised a great point. Take the woman out of it, because you look at my AJ's meetup on a Monday night. There's about 10 to 12 of us in our group. Now, I would say 70% of men are single. So how do you deep dive into a man's life that's single, who's between 30 to 40 years old, and in that same situation of what you were saying, Chris, who hasn't found his worth? Is he relying on a woman to step in to show him his worth? How can a single man find his worth and go, no, this is who I am, this is the value I put on me?
Well, the question is, how do you develop your self-worth? Do you know what I mean? So, and number one is keeping the promises to yourself. Because every time, so if you say, I'm going to go to the gym, yeah, and you go to the gym, how do you feel about yourself? Good, right? Mm-hmm. If you wake up and you go, I'm not going to the gym today. No, I'm not going to go to the gym today. How do you feel about yourself?
Shit house.
Exactly. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I've got no idea what he's talking about. Mate.
Or
I felt good once this week.
or it could be like, oh, okay, so me and well, we're talking about without the missus, but it's like, okay, so I'm going to be positive at work today. You know what I mean? Like I'm going to work on working harder today, you know? And if you do it, you put in a full day's work, you feel good about yourself, don't you? You know? But if you stuff around and take it easy, you can't lie to the man in the mirror, and that's where it all comes from. So it's about keeping those promises to yourself to start off with, and then actually celebrating. And I think the part of the problem is not actually celebrating when you do the right thing, or actually telling yourself you've done the right thing, or even letting one of your mates to go, mate, you worked your ass off today, good work, or you're looking really, really good, or you haven't had a beer in a week, fucking well done, So it's keeping those promises to yourself Yeah. And then also who you're surrounding yourself with, because we do get influenced by the people that are around us. Yeah. So having good, positive role models and people that actually have your back can also help build you up. Yeah. And I totally agree with you, where a woman can do it so easily because, they've got that key to your heart sort of thing, and it is harder to get it from mates. But if you don't have that, just start keeping the promises to yourself. Start hanging around good mates. I think we talked about it the other day, is actually start saying yes to other opportunities. Get out there and travel and see, start focusing on the positive things that are out there. And then all of a sudden, there is that light at the end of the tunnel sort of thing. So
I think sticking with relationships for a bit longer, and we're talking about, say, like the single man, because I think you're spot on, Jamie. I think men creating their own self-worth is where the true value lies, because when you get a self-worth that you've created, you begin to build your identity. When you know your own identity with that self-worth, you know what your value, call it a dollar figure, you know what your dollar figure on the open market is because you've created it within yourself. And I think men that build that self-worth would end up saying no to more relationships than yes. Whereas men that seek it would seem to say yes to more. Whereas if you've created a self-value prior, you would probably say no to more. Not probably, I would say definitely you would say no to more women than you would say yes, because you've developed a self-worth prior. I saw an article again this week, and we touched on it last week about, with the whole sacking of Marty Sheargold on radio because of mentioning women's sports. And I saw it again this week again with the WNBA. I'm a big follower of the NBA, as you all know, but there was I can't remember her name, but she's big in the WNBA. So it's the Women's National Basketball Association. And again, the slogan, we should be paid the same as NBA players. And it's so ridiculous when I see that, right? And the reason I bring this up again is because that in itself, and that's just one sport within a sport, and sport in itself within so many other things and what. So we're looking at something so little minor, but yet that represents on a larger scale how much society or how much the world is screaming for equality, right? Absolutely crying out for equality. Things should be the same, this, which we all made extremely clear last week that is so far just stupidity in its utmost extreme. But the crying out of equality. So you've got society screaming out that we should all be equal, but yet the approach towards us from that same group of people is that we should have a certain value or a certain worth up a bit higher. So it seems as if the same people crying for equality don't actually want us to be equal. Jamie, you're stewing something over. I can see it in your head. Your eyes have squinted.
Well, the first thing that I'm thinking of is, does that mean that men on OnlyFans should be paid the same as the top OnlyFans model?
A butthole's a butthole, dude.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Or is it also, though, isn't that capitalism? Where everyone should be paid the same amount and everyone should get the same amount? Communism, that's it. Yeah, sorry.
Stupidism.
Yeah. But we've already tried that exercise, doesn't it? You should be paid for your worth. And that's what happens. And I've had women that have worked with me in the past who were far better than the guys. And I paid them what they were worth. Do you know what I mean? Like, my old administrator used to basically run the business, and her wage was the same as what I was taking at that time. So, I think, get paid what you're worth. And because let's say if WNBA does go to the stage where it is bigger than the NBA, does that mean that they should also give money to NBA to make up the difference if that eventually happens? Or should they?
Well, that's what this whole.
I don't think we're ever going to find out. But
we're working on hypotheticals here. So, yeah. But that's where my mind went straight to OnlyFans, is that should the guys get paid the same as the girls then?
Well, on that note, mate, I actually don't like your feet pics, so that's why I don't pay for them.
yeah.
But it's the same.
At least trim the toenails, dude.
They're not even my feet. Oh, where do you think social media fits in all of this in regards to the creating expectation of a man's worth?
Social media is the biggest problem for all of it, isn't it? Like, it amplifies whatever we put into it. So we're putting this lunacy out there, and it's growing.
I mean, what's that viral song where it was like looking for a man
Celebrate our differences.
with looking for a man in finance, 6'5", blue eyes. Do you know what I mean? Like this girl. That's also good.
Link on the bottom of the screen, guys.
Oh, I've got a stick in my head now. Sorry, mate. Keep going.
It's all good. So yeah, that's. But so you're putting it out there, but it's nothing that hasn't happened in the past as well. It's also happened for women too. Like that's what Cosmo used to do, where they were like, this had to be a woman, and this was the attractiveness of a woman. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's also happening with us now, where it's like, you know, you're not a man unless you have six figures, or unless you're 6 foot tall, or unless you have a business and you're successful, or unless you do like all these unrealistic expectations. Then, you know, when you actually look at the percentages of the guys that actually meet that, it's 2/5 of bugger all, you know? So, yeah, I think it does put an unrealistic expectation out there. And I'm not bagging out people that are successful and people that have money, because there is a determining factor for people that shows, okay, they must have discipline, or they're most likely to have discipline if they actually can have a successful business and make a lot of money. Do you know what I mean? But that is also the case with people that are fit and healthy as well. They must have discipline to be able to do that and stick to do what they say that they're going to do. So, yeah, and I think that some people in their lives actually sacrifice some areas to make up for the other areas as well too. So some people have put everything they've got into trying to generate wealth, because that's probably how they see themselves as valuable. That's their determining factor, and that's something that they've been told, you know, growing up. So, yeah, you know, we're not all perfect in different areas, and you just got to keep chipping away and trying to become that 1% better type thing.
I think you're spot on, mate. I've seen, I see it all the time flicking through, in regards to social media, flicking through TikTok and Instagram, and you see, you know, all these young people now are trying to be social media influencers, right? So everyone's out there with their little tiny microphone, and they're asking random people on the street questions, right? And I see it all the time, and I've seen it many, many times in this one area where you'll see like a 20-year-old dude, and he's in a lineup outside of a club, or you know, the streets are packed, and it seems like it's about 1 a.m. You know, everybody roaming the streets are all drunk, and you're seeing like these groups of girls, like groups of 2 or 3 girls, and they're wearing skimpy clad outfits. They're slurring all over streets or whatever, they're loud, and you'll see these guys go with the camera and the phone, and they're asking questions, right? And some of the questions being, you know, what do you find attractive about a man, or what do you think is, you know, is a man, and they'll start rattling off things that we're talking about here, like the values of a man, about his character and things like that. But when it comes to worth, and they'll be like, you know, if you find out this guy's broke, what would you do? And these girls are all responding things like, you know, you dump his ass, and they're laughing their heads off, right? And you look at it and you go, they're skimpily clad. It's 1 a.m. in the morning, so they're hardly wearing anything. They're drunk off their face, and that's the response. And it makes me go, fair enough. Okay, I appreciate that that's the answer you're giving, but if that's your target audience, I think that makes a difference, because I think a high value man, or a man of high worth within himself, doesn't care of the response of people like that. Because if that's your target audience, if that's the kind of person you're after, well then that's the kind of person you're going to get. But when I look within myself and who I built myself to be over many, many years, that was never attractive to me. So if that's not my target audience, why should I be concerned that that's what they think a man of high worth is? Oh, you know, because I've seen it. Oh, there was a what's the podcast? The Whatever podcast. I don't know if you've guys ever seen the shorts of the Whatever. There's like a big U shape, and they're asking questions predominantly about dating and stuff. And they ask this question, and it's absolute truth. They're talking about like the worker at Burger King, and they said that if a guy was wealthy and he fell in love with a woman that worked at Burger King, would there be an issue? And the guy's like, no, not a chance at all. But then you go, okay, if the woman was wealthy and she fell in love with a man, found out he worked at Burger King, what would happen? And all these guys like, no, you dump him, nut, get rid of him, nut. And you go, isn't it interesting how that the man of high worth, though, wouldn't see the issue that he'd go, no, because that to me is not a necessity because I am looking for other things that he finds value in the woman. Whereas her response was, nut, all these women, just an instant write-off, which raises the problem, raises the issue of, well, then what's the target audience? I think you've got to understand who your target audience is. If your audience that you're trying to attract are what I'm going to straight out call it low value, low worth women, these skankily, women, if that's your bloody target audience, be a man of no worth, be a man of no value, because that's who you're going to attract.
Well, it's the game you're playing, isn't it?
Absolutely. That's the point you're fishing in. And I think if that's, look, I think it's super important that you understand that a man that's trying to build his self-worth or understand his self-worth needs to understand that the responses he's getting, even just outside of relationships, but the responses he's getting out of so many different areas, understand who your audience is. Because the responses from them, you can determine, well, hang on, I'm actually not driven or determined, or I don't gain my value or find my value or my worth in what you're saying because of who you are as a person. I receive criticism, I receive encouragement, I receive correction a lot different from people I value compared to the people I don't value. If I don't value you in my life and you give me some kind of criticism, I don't give a rip who you are, mate, whatever. But if I value you, I take it on board.
Value can change very quickly, can't it? Like you look at just where this week already, again, the value of toilet paper and water. Look at how that changed. What we were willing to do. People were running around 12 supermarkets trying to panic buy toilet paper again. So if you want to change your value, then I would say you reevaluate the market that you're putting yourself into.
Absolutely.
So a pair of Nike Airs in Africa is going to have a very different value to a pair of Nike Airs in Sydney or Melbourne. So just relook at the market.
That's a good thought, actually, what you just said there, because last week was a perfect example. We left our AJ's meet up last Monday, and we meet up at the tavern that's right next to Woolworths. And as we left, Lisa's messaging me, oh, can you get eggs? Because there's no eggs anywhere. So I walked in determined to pay whatever dollar figure there was on the eggs because we just needed eggs, right? And sure enough, there was only the little 6-packs there that were like, these chickens
Quail eggs
are hand-fed and whatever. So it was like $19 for a 6-pack. And I'm like, but we need eggs, so I've got to get them. But the two guys with me both grabbed like the 124-pack of toilet rolls. I'm like, dudes, don't walk with me. You now fit the category of what we're saying. But it's true, right? Last week when we were heading into, here on the Sunny Coast, we were heading into a cyclone. What we thought to be was a cyclone, which ended up being a fizzle. Anyway, heading into the cyclone, toilet paper, even though it cost $10, its value was through the roof. If you took that same toilet paper to the other side of Australia, its value would have been a quarter. But its value to someone here who needed it meant so much difference. I remember hearing a story, I think I may have shared this story on the podcast before, the story of the guy on the Titanic, where as the Titanic was going down, he was worth an absolute mint, and he ran back to his room, and they interviewed him after because he was a survivor. And they said, and he was a survivor because of his wealth. Interestingly enough, this ties into the story quite well, because of his wealth, and let's just call it worth, he was a survivor because he got a spot on a rescue boat, right? Anyway, they said, you ran back to your room and risked losing a spot, but you went back to your room and came back. What did you grab? And he said, I grabbed 3 oranges. And I said, why'd you grab, but you had your wife's pearls and all that kind of stuff there. He goes, yeah, but I only got 2 pockets. And he goes, like seeing what I was about to step into and floating in the water until I got rescued, I had to determine what was more valuable, dying with a pocket full of pearls or the potential of having to starve to death. So I grabbed 3 oranges. So the value right there and then, you're pushing past worth thousands of dollars of jewels to grab a 30-cent orange. Why? Because the value right there and then is immensely different. And I think this is where, when you dig deeper into the lives of men, and I think we need to do this individually as men, and look past the cost or look past that to find your own worth and your own value to go, well, hang on a minute. building those things in the background that we find worth so much more, which is when I look at dollar figure, like when Lisa and I got married, I was a second year apprentice. I proposed at the start or mid of my second year and got married with 3 months to go of my second year apprenticeship. I was on $324 a week. I was dead. She was actually earning, I think we joked about, it was like $17 a week more than me, but still prepared to get married. Now, neither of us had any idea of the path, the journey in business and stuff that we would take, but she married me on things that she found worth so much more valuable, which I appreciate, because now we're still the same people to a degree that we are, but we grew that journey together, which is going back to what you were saying, Jamie, before about, you know, the woman looking deeper within when you're in the dating scene, of people that are going, no, you and me together, like we're going to do this together. And I think that comes down to a lot of men looking within themselves too, to go, I'm going to build things that I do believe are valuable, regardless of what the audience is saying, because I'm attracting or wanting to attract a certain type of person. So I think a lot of it comes down to when you're listening to the audience and you're listening to the crowds, are they your crowd anyway? Because that crowd's going to determine your worth if you let it.
Well, I think one thing that came up to my mind when you first mentioned this was something that Mike was talking about. It was a fair while ago. It was when you had those couple of funerals in a row.
Yep.
And you were like, okay, so there was so much that I learnt about these people. And it was amazing how much these people were loved within the community because of what they did. You know, there is that saying, you know, you can't take that money to the grave with you. Yeah. So I think that is sort of the things that we should be looking at, is like, you know, how much impact are we going to create on the people around us, and how much do we give to the people around us, and what we do for the people around us? Because there is only so much, there's only a certain stage where you do things for yourself, and then it has to become about other people. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
So that's what we should be looking at for worthwhiles. So,
have you guys ever seen that movie Grown Ups with Adam Sandler and Rob Schneider and that? It's one of our absolute family favourites, right? We love it. And Grown Ups 1 and Grown Ups 2. But anyway, the role of Chris Rock, do you guys remember the role he played in that? He's the stay-at-home dad, and his wife's the one that goes out and works. And he's the one that stays home and cooks and cleans, and the mother-in-law lives there. And do you guys remember the role?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not disregarding stay-at-home dads by any means, right? But I think that movie portrayed that role perfectly on how society treats that worth within a man. I'll tell you why. Watching the movie, because he is the stay-at-home dad and she's the one out going to work, but yet Adam Sandler and all the other guys are the ones out there. Like Adam Sandler in the movie is quite wealthy, right? And he's married to, what's her name? Selma Hayek, is it? So extremely pretty. Is that who
Well done.
Yeah. But okay, so there's my point. And in the movie, he's the richest there, and who's he married to?
Yep.
The supermodel, right? And you've got Chris Rock there, who's the stay-at-home dad. Now, the dynamics within each family, because you get to know each family, how they all operate, him being the stay-at-home dad, when you watch him interact with his wife, he's the bitch. He's the one that gets bossed around, and he's treated with such less value because financially what he's contributing is next to nothing or nothing, because he's not the provider. And the fact that now he's not the provider and there's no financial contribution within the family, he's treated like an absolute piece of crap. And so all of a sudden you see this man that, well, men in general, that there needs to carry some kind of worth, but yet his worth was determined because of the fact that he wasn't working anymore.
Now the question is, was it his mates that treated him like the bitch, though?
No, it was his
wife.
His wife.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So, yeah. So, and I've seen that play out. Yeah. But you've got to think about attractiveness, right? There's masculinity and there's femininity, right? And they've got to have the opposites for it to work. So, and that is part of it, where, you know, either the guy does become the more feminine type, because I think that is part of the problem, and why there's such a war on masculinity is because there's so many women who've stepped into that masculine role because they've had to. They've wanted, you know, they wanted to be independent. They want to make their own money. They want to do all that sort of stuff, which is all great. But then they also yearn to be more feminine as well too. So it's hard for them to let that go in that situation because they don't feel safe, and because they don't feel protected, they don't feel provided for, and they don't feel like you can lead the family. They don't let go of that masculinity, that little ounce of their being more in control sort of thing, which does destroy that dynamic of a lot of relationships in that aspect where, because you've seen it so many times where the guy is masculine, but then the woman is also masculine, and then it's just butting heads. So you've got to have that polarity for it to work.
Yeah. The girls have got to switch the masculinity off behind closed doors.
Yep.
They have to
Please.
go back
Please.
where they should be. No, but they like that too. Like they want to have that, the feeling of being, taken care of and dominated, I guess, for sure.
It's interesting you brought that up because
In the bedroom.
but it's true because I think it was like 60 something, it was high 60 something, 67% or something like that, where they talked about inside the bedroom and intimate times and sex and things like that, that it was like a high percentage of women prefer to be told what to do when it comes to sex. So they actually, because there's nothing more, do we use the word domineering or conquering? What's the word that, let's use the word domineering. It may not be the right word to use, but there's nothing more domineering, I guess, for a man than to conquer a woman and to have sex with her, right? But then when you peel that back and you go, but what do women find more attractive? Statistics show that they actually like more to be told what to do.
Yeah, like you get two, for instance, like this is kind of like my scenario that I've got in my marriage. Like we're both very successful business people, or she's not a businesswoman, but she's a very corporate girl. Like she's pretty high up in tab, and she's got a really high paying job. But she has mentioned to me before that she likes to put her pussy pants on when she gets home. Like at work, she's a leader, and she's a strong, independent woman. But when she gets home, she just wants to switch off and be babied by me. So you got it, but that's critical, right? She can't come home with all that energy and all that masculinity and clash with me, because I'm not going to take that step down. I'm a man. I'm staying up here, and it's critical when you've got that relationship dynamic.
It's very interesting, and I think I might have mentioned this before. That's not going to say I'll use the word challenge because it's definitely a challenge. It's not an issue by any means, but it's definitely a challenge. That's the challenge that Lisa and I have, because we work in the same business together as a partnership, and the role that she has is a very leadership role, and her office is inside the house. And so the challenge we have is that when she leaves her desk and goes into the kitchen kind of thing, like to do something for dinner or something like that, the challenge we find is trying to get her to switch off and being, hey, when you're behind that computer and behind that phone, there are so many people you're directing and this. I get it. But when you step away from that, we need to find husband and wife Wayne here, because you step away from there and you're still at work, Lisa, and hey, well, this is not going to work. At work, Lisa is not going to work when we're trying to cook dinner together, because it just doesn't work. The clash is too big, and I'm not here to be told, what to do kind of feel. So I totally get it. It's hey, do you guys remember a couple of months ago we had Chris Perry on? Remember the guy that had the motorbike accident when he went camping and broke his neck?
Yep.
When I first saw his story, because like I've mentioned, his wife was a real estate agent who we bought this place off. So that's how I got to know Amber, and I hadn't met Chris yet, but I got to know Amber. Anyway, hearing about Chris's story and having the accident, breaking his neck and becoming this invalid and living in a wheelchair and stuff, had an amazing story and why we reached out to him. Anyway, when we brought him on, we can all agree that the guy was an absolute legend of a bloke. Like, we had him on, talked through his story, heard the ins and outs, and we all left going, what a legend of a dude. Like, just a rock solid, just a good, down-to-earth bloke, right? Yep. And suffered an immense accident, like life-changing accident, but legend of a dude. When you pull back a couple of months before or whatever, prior to his accident, and learning what he did for a job, his job was very significant in the contribution to the family. the guy has an accident. The guy's now an invalid. You take away something major in that guy's life on who he is as a provider. Does that take away, as good as the guy was, that we're all going, what a legend of a dude, now he can't provide because he's overnight as an invalid in a wheelchair. Does that subtract from the guy's worth?
Depends the game he's playing, right? Like if he'd gone out and found a woman who was purely about, I want money, that's going to drastically change the game. But he didn't. He went out and found a good woman who they were on the same page, and it didn't change his value in the slightest.
I think it depends on who he is around. You know what I mean? Because you think about how much worth he provided by telling his story to everyone else. You know, he was like a pillar of positivity and not giving up. And when shit happens and you're down and out, and you think that, you know, that could be one of the worst things that could happen to a man, is losing your ability to be able to protect, to be able to provide, you know. But it wasn't a pity party when he was here. It was inspirational when he was here.
Yeah, that's right.
Like, if anything, it added more worth to, like, definitely added more to my life going, you know, even when things are tough, you know, you've got nothing to cry about. Suck it up, princess, you know? Like, I think that, so it just depends on what perception you're gonna take it from, you know? And Amber probably sees what a great man he was, and that's why she, you know, they're working together as a team together to be able to do that sort of stuff. So I think it is who you surround yourself with and how you look at that. So because that's all I got from him was like positivity and determination, and you know, like he was like, I'm not letting this fucking beat me. I'm in there, and he didn't go from okay, I'm just gonna, this is the situation. He's like, my new job now is to get into rehab and be able to go out and spend time with my family again as soon as possible. So, yeah.
You brought up an amazing point, actually, on what then creates that value and worth within a man, because the strength and determination that he found within himself to strive to become, because remember the shirt he came was that 1% better every day, was that shirt he wore? And going through that accident, being stripped away from the ability to physically do anything and everything, but his determination to then pick himself up and, you know, I will get better, I will walk again, I will do all these things. That in itself, I guess for him, it was a journey of discovery of an attribute within him that maybe he didn't know he realised he had, or that was there just waiting to be activated. But that determination, so when you look at it like that, I think you've brought up an interesting point, that determination within itself becomes attractive to somebody. So because who he was prior wasn't, I'm not going to say it wasn't that man, but his wife would have experienced something different about him now because of the accident. So something was peeled away because he couldn't no longer be the financial provider. But then an attribute within him to become this determined, I'm not going to fail, I'm not going to quit, I'm going to get back there. That and it's also really when we can strip all this away, society has fed men a lie that their worth carries a dollar figure. Because in reality, what we're discovering here is that women, if it is the type of woman that is attractive to just that, it must be a very, very minority group of women. Because in reality, women are finding attractive the things that we're offering, that we are putting out there. Yep. I've got another mate. I think you might have met him, Chris, years ago. Sorry, you're going to...
Oh, it is refreshing to know that, you know, there's girls around like that, because you do see a lot of guys that have had bad accidents and they've been quadriplegics or whatever, and sometimes you see instances where they're about to get married and they still get married, and they, you know, they walk down the aisle and all that stuff. It's not often you hear that something's happened to that, like that, to a man and his wife's left him because of that. And they generally stay around.
Yeah, you're right. It's I was going to say, I think you might have met this guy because he and I were really good friends when you and I first met 12 or so years ago. His name was Pablo. I don't know if I ever told you about it, but he was the guy that worked at the fruit and veg exports out of Sydney Harbour. And I used to get all those boxes of water and all those boxes of fruit and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Legend
I
of
was
a guy.
like, where's this story going?
Pablo, the import
working at
export.
the import-export.
They were wild times, Wayno.
he was definitely popular.
No, he wasn't, mate. I'd go to his house and he'd have this tray back ute, and it would be loaded with like a pallet and a half of boxed water, mangoes that get shipped out of Australia. Anyway, he used to just load me with so much stuff. I'd get it, and then I'd go to work the next day around the job site, and be like, "Hey, you want a box of water?" And anyway, please be my friend, have some water. No, but when I first met him, he was in a walking frame, and it was about 3 or 4 years prior to that, he got diagnosed with MS, right? I met him in a walking frame. About 2 years after me meeting him, it went from walking frame to a wheelchair. Now, it was about 5 years after that, and this is still to this day now because I see photos. I'd go around and visit him at his house, and his door would always be open because he couldn't answer the door, and he'd be lying on the floor in his lounge room in an adult nappy because the dude just can't move anymore. And so his life is spent with the TV on, lying on the floor of his thing. A carer comes in every now and then, all that kind of stuff. Now, he and I are still mates, but I watched the journey of his wife and him go through this because I helped him do some renovations to their bathroom to accommodate for him. But his concern was because he was a triathlon guy, so he'd do the surf, the ride, and the running, right? To now, lies on a lounge room floor, full time in a nappy. The dude is like, that must take a lot away from a guy, right? And we'd go out for dinner, and we'd help him get his wheelchair out, help him get his walker out, and we'd go and have a steak or whatever. Anyway, I remember him saying to me that his main concern was that this is not appealing or attractive, or this is, who am I anymore, right? And so his concern was his wife would leave him. His missus is an absolute champion, but it made me realise, again, to tie into this whole Chris Perry one as well, and just the generalisation of where we're going with this topic, it's made me realise that, like what Chris just said, there are some amazing women out there, more than what we realise, that even if we're not talking relationships, just in general on where we get our worth as men, I think we can peel it all back right now and say we've been lied to, or we've just believed a lie, however you want to put it, that our worth and our value is actually seen different to what we actually think it is. Maybe we've created it in our own heads. Maybe it's a concept that we've just conjured up with a contribution from social media, with a contribution from society, but we've definitely believed a lie, which in turn should make men realise that they are more valuable and worth a hell of a lot more than what they currently believe they are.
Yep.
And if you can switch that part off in your head, saying I need to be wealthy to be valued, and focus more on the things that, other attributes in your life that may be attractive to a woman or may be of value to your life, it might be a better way to attack life in general. Switch off I need to be making millions of dollars so I can attract that, that dream girl, and maybe just focus on being a good guy instead.
There is still a very small niche, not going to call it a niche market, but there's still a very niche area or a small area where it does exist. And I'll tell you why. I had a funny thing happen just last night. I got a mate of mine over in, I'll just be careful how I tell this story. I've got a mate of mine overseas, let's just say, who I went to visit recently. Really good bloke, legend of a guy, and we had a great time out. Really, really good fella. Anyway, he's worth an absolute mint. Like he does a lot of stuff with the rich and famous, and he's worth an absolute packet. Anyway, he's been divorced, I think, for the last 2 years. Anyway, so he's on the dating scene. And so when I was over there, we were having a chat and said, "Oh, so are you dating?" He's like, "Oh yeah." So his ex, I'm trying to be careful how I tell this story because I won't tell this part of the story. I'll just tell you the second part. Anyway, his past girlfriend would blow your mind on who it was. You'd go, "Wow, okay." Now he's just joined a dating app. Now the app is designed, I didn't even know it existed because that's how out of touch I am with dating apps. But there is a dating app out there that's purely for a certain level of person. So you have to be a certain level of celebrity. You have to be worth dollar figure. So, like there is an app that's you've got to be verified and certified to even enter into this app. Now, reason being is because last time I had dinner, he's like, "Hey, bro, how are you?" I said, "Yeah, a bit of a chat." He's like, "Yeah, I'm just about to go to, it's late here or early morning, I should say. About to head off." And he goes, just to let you know, I've not seeing someone, but potentially starting to see someone because I'm in chat with someone. I said, "Oh, who is it?" And he goes, "Oh, you're not going to believe it." And he sent me a snapshot of who it was. And it is a very, very high-class celebrity actor lady in the States. And I'm like, "Are you serious?" Like, yeah, we're chatting now and things like that. And I'm going, it made me realise that, see, the normal average Joe doesn't even have access to that kind of app. But there are apps out there that require what society has created, a certain level of value or a certain level of worth for men to even get on the app. So the app itself is going, you need to be, in our eyes, valuable or worth a certain amount of entirety or as a whole before you can even jump on this. He's obviously a part of it. He's jumped on it. But it's made me realise that as awesome as this celebrity person that he's now potentially going to start dating is, she's also...
How do you know she's awesome, though?
No, this is what I
We
say.
don't know who people are behind closed doors.
This is what I'm going to say. But I know she's been divorced, I think, twice. And you look at that and you go, there's a wow factor to it. Wow, good on you, mate. But then there's also that part where you go, but is that the kind of audience you try? Is that the pond you're fishing in? But like, is that who you want? Is that long term? Because she's not had anything long term. She's also, won't say her age, but over 30, over 20, let's say.
Let's
So
cut to the chase. Who is it?
I'm not going to say it on here. I'll tell you after. But it does make you realise that, hey, yeah, that's cool to have that, to link arms with that and be around the street and that to be seen. But that in itself, I'm not going to say it's fake, but that in itself, you go, but is that the audience you're creating? But it just made me realise that society, as small as that niche may be, there is still a societal expectation or a societal creation, whatever you want to call it, that still exists that says, oh, no, you have to be a certain whatever, which is sad, but that's what men are up against. Looking at, I've got a really good mate of mine going through this at the moment, through a divorce. When it comes to divorce, when you combine all the things that we've talked about already, people wanting equality, where men find their worth and their value, things like that. Now, when a man goes through a divorce, and we're talking Australia, Australian speaking here because this is all we've experienced, why is it still so unevenly balanced when it comes to the separation of things for men and women? He's going through a divorce, but yet his net worth is going to her at an 80-20 percentage. When it comes to the worth within a man, how does that even, how is that represented? Is that saying he's actually worth 20% of what he's built? Is he saying that his ability to go out there and gain back a worth or a value? Why does that, how does that imbalance step into a man's worth?
It's about the only time that a woman's willing to devalue herself, I suppose. Look at me. He has to give me 80% because I can't go out and do that once he's gone.
That's exactly what it is. You're spot on.
That's what they're saying. But if you ask them before that, no, I can do this. I'm a strong, independent woman.
So all of a sudden, that her man's now become more valuable.
This is exactly the point I'm trying to get to. Because leading into it, totally different. Because now that there's a separation, why is it that through a divorce, women seek so much more on the backing of, oh, well, he can go out and do it, he can go out. But prior leading into it...
No, we do this together.
So where's that come from?
It's greed, isn't it? And spite. I reckon there'd be a bit of spite there. Yeah. All separation. Yeah, you both have to have some blame in a divorce, right? No matter what it is, they both have to be, might not be equal, but you're both in it together. So once it goes, there's going to be a bit of spite. If a man is good at creating wealth, you're taking a little bit of him before he goes.
Yeah, well, that's it. They're going to take as much as they can get, you know. So, and I think that
They become pirates.
yeah, and even in the case where, like, even in my divorce, I gave everything that I could at that time, yeah, and because I was like, oh, screw it, I'm still young, I'll be able to make more money. It's okay. Do you know what I mean? So, and it was mainly because my mum always told me when I was growing up that dad left us with nothing. Yeah. And then when I spoke to my dad, like years later, like 10, 15 years later, he was like, no, it ruined us. We had to sell the farm. We had to move into a smaller place. We had to do all this sort of stuff, you know, paying the child support, which I was told that was never paid. You know, nearly ruined, like, you know what I mean? Like that was a massive chunk every single week. And I was like, wow. So, and even when, I gave everything I could, which really wasn't much at that time. But I gave everything I could. But even like 2 years later, after I had paid off all the credit card debts, and if I, you know what I mean? Like, and I got myself back on the feet, you know, my ex-wife still turned around to me and said, oh, you didn't leave us with much anyway. But I gave everything I could. So I think in that mindset that, you know, there's so many guys out there who think they're doing the right thing because they think that they're gonna be recognised for it, or the ex-partner's gonna recognise. They don't. So, and I think that's the advice I gave when you were talking about that. I was like, mate, just get the lawyers to sort it out and just get, you know what I mean? Just go, cool, split 50-50, here's what it is. And if not, here's the lawyers, what the lawyers can do. And then, you know, just keep as much as you can. Don't just be a walkover and give everything away, because it doesn't matter how much you give. It's never going to be enough anyway. And look, this is life. Everyone sees their life from their own perspective through their own lenses. Do you know what I mean? The story I just told then was through my perspective. You know, my ex-wife would probably see it from a totally different perspective as well too. So I think that is part of that problem where your vision isn't together anymore. It's totally separate. So you're looking through different lenses, which is going to happen. But, you know, it is part of the man where you just, you know, society expects you to suck it up and just get on with it, sort of thing. And I just think it's an overcorrection, like we were talking about previously, where, you know, women did have it tough previously, and now it's overcorrected the other way, where, you know, it's the guys who's getting the hard end of the stick now.
But it's funny, like you look at the makeup of a marriage or a family unit between the husband and wife raising kids, and the contribution of what we're going through about, you know, the worth and the value of a man. When you take away the money side of things, the attributes behind that men have, the loyalty, the strengths and all these different things that make up his identity that he can contribute to raising kids, right? So you look at this mother and father together, they're raising children and they're both contributing, you know, men contributing the masculine, that's, you know, part of it, the women contributing the feminine in raising and moulding this next generation of kids, whether they're boys or girls, doesn't matter. Now, when it comes to a divorce or a separation, the custody is more often than not, but let's just go with what I'm seeing in what I deal with, more often than not, the custody is split as even as it can be. That's right. So society is saying, you know, like whether you go for a 50-50 or a 60-40, but the approach from both sides try to be a 50-50, right? Because society says, oh no, you still need the contribution from what the mother can provide and what the father can provide on who they are. But the moment it becomes financial, oh no. The man provides a hell of a lot more now. So it seems as if what we really have to offer to these raising of the kids, society is happy to split 50-50. Yeah, your mother can provide all the stuff you can provide, but when it comes to financially, no, the father needs to give more. So it's as if society in itself has said that our value is more tilted towards what we bring financially to the table. Because why isn't it like, financial, it's always 50-50, but the father gets him 80% of the time because the father can bring into the, I'm actually bringing a very vital point up here. Let's just say you've got, my mate at the moment has 2 boys, husband and wife raising 2 boys. The split has happened. 80% financially has already gone to her. So the societal expectation is, I know what he brings to the table, the value and the worth we've put on him is wrapped up a hell of a lot more in the finance. So he's providing already 80% goes to her. But even the custody is now pointing all towards her. And it makes you stop and wonder when you go, when you look at what worth and what value lies within men, you've got this, it's not just an opportunity or an honour, but it's a responsibility now of raising 2 boys. When it comes to the raising of the 2 boys, I have nothing against what women can contribute to raising sons. Amazing things. But just or as more as important as what the father can contribute to raising the boys, don't even get me started. That is the most ridiculous thing you could think of. Young boys need their fathers in their lives. So when it comes to, say, custody things, it blows my mind how society pushes the custody towards more the female, even in the raising of boys, which it makes me wonder, no wonder men feel so devalued, as if they have nothing to contribute, when even just our system that's set up for divorce makes you go, oh, no, we're quite happy that you can provide 80% of the finances because that's all we see your value that you can add to this. But the value that you can add to raising them, no, sorry, mate, she gets at 80 as well. It blows my mind, especially the young boys.
Yeah, because I had that too, where I was like, oh yeah, you can just get him every second weekend. And I was like, not a chance. And I had to fight for years to actually make that happen. Oh, but you work too much. Okay, I'll work less. Oh, no, well, but this is the standard way it should go. It's not the standard way it should go. Like a dad should be in your kid's life 50% of the time. So I had to change so many things to be able to, you know what I mean, to be able to get that 50-50 custody. And I tell you what, I regret none of it whatsoever. Yep. Let my business go, did everything I could because that was the most important thing at that particular time, was to actually make sure that I was there. Yeah. And emotionally, I don't know whether Kobe would be the young man he is today if I wasn't there. So, and I think that it is so important that you've got to understand as a dad, and the research backs this up, is how important having dads in kids' lives actually is. So, yeah, I think it's absolutely ridiculous that people think every second weekend is the way to go. Be in your kids' lives as much as you possibly can. Some people can't do that because of work restrictions. I get it, but that's what got me into the self-development and the education and the coaching and getting mentored and all that sort of stuff, was because I had to work out a way to be able to still make money or do what I do with working less, so I could be there for the school pickup and drop off. And does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When you take all the stuff that we've just said, and you've got men out there now questioning their own worth, their own value, we've looked at so many different facets of it. And you look at just what we just said then in regards to, say, a separation or a divorce. Society is telling us and convincing us of things like that. Like, you just look at the divorce scenario, family court, and how family court works. So try and convince me still that we aren't in a war on masculinity.
I think we totally are. And I think part of the divorce problem is because men aren't valued. Their wives or their partners or whatever think that they can go out and find someone better. Yeah. And most of the time they can't. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen so many men on their second or third, marriages, and it just sort of gets better as they go. They find they're happier as they go. some people are against sort of mail order brides and stuff like that, you know. But I don't actually see a problem with it if it's done right. You know, a guy who works hard his whole life, you know, and then finds a woman who will actually appreciate him and appreciate the house that he's given and the respect that she's given. And do you know what I mean? Some of those are some of the happiest relationships I've seen.
It says a lot about our society that we have a group of men that are now seeking women from over there just because they're going to be grateful for what they've got. It's a very transactional relationship, but that's where they're going.
When you look at how simplistic men are, and we've covered this many times, but I think you've brought up an interesting point there, Mikie. Like, why is it that you see as funny as this may sound, but you see the retiree, the guy there who's hit 60, he's divorced, and is heading into retirement. He goes over there to find a wife. You see these men by the busload going to places like Thailand, going to places throughout Asia and all that. Why is that attractive to a men? Because as simplistic as they are, they're choosing someone that just wants to hey, I'm not after much. I just like to be appreciated and respected in just the most simplest way. And they get it. So surely it's cultural. It has to be cultural.
Why is it the Thai lady sees more value in that man than an Australian lady?
Well, do you think there's the dollar value attached to it?
100%. It's all dollar value, isn't it? Has to be in that situation.
Well,
you go in knowing what you're getting.
With the dollar, but also it's a lifestyle value as well too.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And they're looking after their families and stuff like that. But it's not only, say, Thailand and stuff like that. It is also other cultures. For instance, Japan. You know, if a lady isn't married by the time she's 30, you know, she's not classified as a high value sort of woman sort of thing. It's in their culture. I think they've got a name for it. Which now I'm not saying that I don't agree with that. Like, you know what I mean? That women are valuable throughout their whole lives. But you see 35, 40-year-old women here, though, they think that they can still compete with the 21-year-old women, you know? But it's that mindset of that I can get whatever I want. And I think part of the problem is that there's so many guys out there that have low self-worth that will just take whatever they can get and will just put up with whatever it is because they're worried that they're going to be lonely and they're not going to find anyone, you know?
Well, that's what we said at the start, that the reason men say yes to more relationships is because of their own value, self-worth that they've put upon themselves. If they increased their self-worth and their self-value, they would say no to more relationships like that. Well, fellas, anything else you want to add? That was a big one.
Right.
I've got so much more actually written down that we could go through, but look, we're pushing for time. I'd like to hear your final thoughts.
I just think it's self-worth. And one thing I found was when I was working at the Sheraton when I was very young, it was actually really interesting. It was the people that thought they had money that were actually the ones who treated people not as nicely. And it was the people who actually did have money and they were confident in who they were as a person. They were some of the nicest people that were out there. So I think actually the better you look at yourself and the more value you put on yourself, the better it is.
Spot on. Chrisso, any final words, buddy?
Just know that you are more valuable than you think.
Mikie?
Yep. Cost versus value. Cost is how much money you've got. Value is what's inside. If you look at a diamond, a cut polished diamond that's been worked on is worth more on the market. But a diamond is a diamond. So if you're a guy out there and you don't feel valued, you don't think you're getting what you want out of life, you might just be an uncut diamond. All it means is there's a little bit of work to do, and you can have that perceived value just like anyone else. So don't discount yourself based on your situation. we all carry an equal value.
Spot on, mate. Look, I took some notes, and we'll close out with these notes. But I want to back on what you just said, Jamie, too. I think one of the most important things here that any man can take away from this is discovering and building their own self-worth, learning to celebrate yourself in those areas, because that in itself creates a value. I think learning what your target audience is key in regards to discovering how you set your own value, learning what your audience is. If you can change who your audience is on how, who's listening or who you're trying to attract or anything like that, the moment you change your audience, I think that plays a massive role in you increasing instantly your self-value, because you'll realise that a lot of people that you're trying to impress, you wouldn't care about anyway. And I think understand that we've been lied to. I think we've all come to the agreement here that there are, especially when it comes to relationships, let's just stick to that to close it out. But I think we've been lied to when it comes to that there are some amazing women out there that money may contribute to an attractiveness to a degree, but it's nowhere near as the importance that we've put on it, because society itself it's lied to us. Society has made it seem like it's a far bigger contribution on who you are, but it's by no means is. I believe what makes up a man is his own self-worth and building his own identity through that. So I think that's major. Well, gentlemen, once again, thanks for joining me here on the panel. It's been great. It's heavy. I'm loving this series, and we'll be seeing more of you on the panel. Gentlemen, thank you once again for joining us here at the Men's Collective Podcast. We are the Average Joes. Hit up the website, hit up the socials, see where all of our meetups are this week. Make sure you get along. Jump on the website, grab some merch, buy a shirt, buy a hat, buy a schooner glass, whatever you want to do. But more importantly, get along to your meetup and spread the word about the podcast. Gentlemen, once again, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, boys.
Cheers.
See you, lads.